In the infinite expanse of the galaxy, civilization stretched beyond the imagination of any single species. For thousands of years, the universe had been a playground for the most advanced and intelligent races, each bound by their own rules of existence. And among them, Earth had remained an obscure, unimportant, hidden on the edge of a lesser-known spiral arm of a galaxy that had no reason to care about a backwater planet like theirs. But that was before they saw humanity, before they realized what could happen when a species long accustomed to surviving against odds finally snapped. The first true encounter occurred on a seemingly innocuous day. A small scout ship, a relic of a forgotten war, drifted into the fringe of human space, its sensors barely able to pick up the signals of distant planetary systems. The ship was on an exploratory mission, tasked with gathering information on the primitive species populating Earth's corner of the universe. The species known as humans had been nothing more than a curiosity, a simple anomaly. They were fierce, unpredictable, and prone to bouts of violence, but they had no advanced technology, at least not on the scale of galactic powers. For centuries, they had been a curiosity, never a threat. The scout ship had no intention of landing on Earth. It hovered far above, gathering faint transmissions of radio signals and television broadcasts that barely reached the vacuum of space. Its purpose was clear: observe, study, record. That was until it happened. The moment was so insignificant to the ship's crew that none of them could have predicted the fallout. The human race, seemingly frail and disorganized by the standards of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, had finally come together, not with the quiet precision of a galactic society, but with a brute force that caught the attention of the stars themselves. The first sign of it was a transmission that suddenly flooded the ship's communication channels. The image was crude by the standards of galactic technology, static, half-formed, but unmistakably human. A message. "We're done waiting." The words blared across the ship's screens, echoing in all their guttural, primal defiance. No transmission of such boldness had ever come from any species in the history of the universe. It wasn't a request or a plea. It wasn't an invitation for dialogue, nor a cry for help.
It was a statement.
A declaration. The ship's crew, an alliance of species from across the stars, each more ancient and technologically advanced than humanity could ever hope to be, was caught off guard. The message continued, the static giving way to a clearer image. A man, standing amidst the chaos of a human city, raised his fist to the sky. In the background, explosions from a conflict between two human factions lit up the darkened skyline, and in his eyes burned something that no alien species had ever seen before: resolve. "We know what you've done," the man said, his voice full of raw emotion, his words etched into the very fabric of the transmission. "We've waited too long, watched too patiently. And now we're coming for you." The transmission ended abruptly. For a moment, the ship's crew was silent, its sensors still processing the influx of data. The command bridge was filled with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. No species, no matter how warlike, had ever made such a bold statement, especially one directed outward, into the cosmos. It was as if a cornered animal had suddenly realized that it was capable of standing up to the predators that had kept it in check. But there was more. The next transmission wasn't a message. It was a series of signals, sharp and steady. The crew scrambled to interpret the data, its complexity impossible to ignore. The humans had somehow unlocked a previously unknown form of communication, a resonance embedded deep within their biology. It was a frequency that humans alone could comprehend. It was more than words. It was a song that vibrated with a primal energy that made even the most technologically advanced minds uneasy. And then came the countdown. The scout ship's sensors detected something massive, something that sent waves of dissonant frequency across the entire galaxy. A second transmission burst into the stars, but this one wasn't a message. It was a direct beacon, a flare of unimaginable energy, a signal to every corner of the galaxy. "We are done waiting," it repeated, but this time, it was not just an idea. It was a reality. Humanity, in all its chaotic, impulsive nature, had made its first move, its declaration. And it wasn't just directed at the world that had long confined them. It was a warning to the universe itself. On the ship, the command center went into full alert. The crew members, once confident in their superiority, were now overwhelmed with the gravity of the situation. No one had ever seen a species this young make such a bold, public move toward asserting itself. No one had ever seen a species so willing to fight and so capable of winning. Because as the ship's sensors began to scan deeper, they realized something horrifying. The humans weren't just asserting themselves with words. They were rapidly advancing technologically, faster than any species had ever imagined. Where once their spacefaring technology had been rudimentary at best, humanity had somehow found a way to bridge the gap between their primitive beginnings and the sophisticated understanding of the universe that had taken centuries for other species to grasp. And with that newfound knowledge, humanity was coming for them. The first battle wasn't on a battlefield. It wasn't fought with ships or weapons, but with a simple, undeniable fact: humanity had finally lost its patience. Across the stars, on every distant planet that had ever dismissed them as a minor nuisance, every species that had turned a blind eye to the potential of the humans, the message was clear: humanity was not waiting any longer. The universe had forgotten what it was like to see a species rise from obscurity and challenge the very powers that held dominion over the stars. And no one, no species, no empire would ever forget the moment when humanity finally, truly lost its patience.
Section 2: The First Strike. The scout ship's crew was still in shock as the transmission ended, their senses overwhelmed by the flood of data. On their home planet, the War Council of the Intergalactic Federation had already begun to prepare for what they now knew was inevitable. Humanity, a species they had long underestimated, was on the verge of a transformation that could change the course of the galaxy forever. For centuries, the Federation had kept track of Earth's inhabitants with a kind of detached amusement. They were a species trapped on their small planet, constantly warring with themselves, constantly struggling to survive. No different than countless other worlds that rose and fell, each one with its own fleeting moment of glory before the harsh hand of time claimed them. The Federation had watched humanity from afar, dismissing them as too chaotic, too fractured, too disorganized to ever pose a serious threat. But as the data continued to pour in, the reality set in. The humans were already changing. And worse, they were doing it at an alarming rate. The very systems that had once held their civilization back, political divisions, religious conflicts, regional wars, were beginning to dissolve under the pressure of something else: unity. In the blink of an eye, the planet had gone from divided factions to a singular, focused entity, driven by a singular purpose. Across human space, from the urban sprawls of Earth's cities to the settlements on the moons of Mars, a deep, collective resolve was rising. The leaders of Earth, once fragmented and territorial, had found common ground. The message they had sent to the stars was more than just a threat, it was a rallying cry. And in a moment that would forever haunt the memories of those who had witnessed it, the first strike was launched. It started in the depths of Earth's oceans. Beneath the surface of the Pacific, the humans had built something more powerful, more destructive than anyone had thought possible for a species that had never even left their planet's atmosphere in their early history. Hidden beneath the waves, deep inside the tectonic plates of the ocean floor, was a device unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was called the Prometheus engine. A prototype, the Prometheus engine was humanity's first true weapon capable of harnessing the vast, untapped energy of their own planet's core. It was a hybrid of geothermal power and quantum energy technology, a combination of primitive force and futuristic design. At its core, the engine harnessed the magnetic energy of Earth's molten core and converted it into a massive, focused beam, capable of striking beyond the limits of their own solar system. The first strike was aimed at the very heart of the Intergalactic Federation's most powerful fleet, a fleet that had been monitoring the human race for centuries, too comfortable in its own superiority to believe that Earth could ever become a real threat. And then, on a quiet night in the far reaches of the galaxy, the humans fired their first shot. The shot was felt long before it was seen. The Prometheus engine unleashed its energy with a violent eruption of force, sending shockwaves through the very fabric of spacetime. The wave of energy stretched across the void, distorting the local gravitational fields, bending light, and creating a ripple effect that disrupted every sensor in the nearby star systems. Entire fleets of ships, once confident in their invulnerability, suddenly found themselves incapacitated, their navigation systems thrown into disarray. Communications were severed. The delicate systems of warp drives, hypergates, and wormholes that the Federation relied on to travel across vast distances were rendered useless. The strike was not a direct attack on a planet or a specific target. Instead, it was a signal, a demonstration of humanity's newfound power. The first blow had been struck, an invisible, silent wave that shattered the balance of power across the stars. In the command center of the Federation, panic set in. The ships that had once traveled through hyperspace and wormholes with ease were now drifting aimlessly through space. Entire fleets, thousands of ships, had been left vulnerable. Systems that had been thought invincible were suddenly malfunctioning, their crews powerless to respond to the sudden chaos. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's greatest minds were scrambling, uncertain of how to combat the force that had just been unleashed. No one knew how the humans had managed to develop such technology so quickly. No one could explain how they had learned to harness the latent energies of their home planet so effectively. The fact that they had done it in secret, beneath the surface of their oceans, only added to the sense of dread. Humanity had been preparing in ways no one had expected. They had learned from their mistakes, from their bloody history. And now they were striking back. The Intergalactic Federation's leaders had no choice but to call an emergency summit. Across the galaxy, representatives from dozens of different species gathered in a neutral space. A massive station built into the heart of a dying star. It was here, in the shadow of a collapsing sun, that the leaders of the Federation would come face to face with the truth they had long refused to acknowledge. Humanity had arrived. The human message was clear. They were no longer passive. They were no longer the hunted. The Federation leaders, once arrogant in their centuries of dominance, now found themselves in a position of uncertainty. For the first time in their history they had no answers. They had never anticipated the rise of a species like humanity. They had underestimated the raw potential of the human will, their ability to adapt, to survive, to create. And they were not ready for what was coming next. Humanity wasn't just going to defend its home anymore. They weren't going to wait for a fair fight. The humans had tasted something new, power. The first strike was only a warning, a reminder that the universe had underestimated them for too long. And in the void of space, the stars seemed to dim as the galaxy collectively held its breath, knowing that the second strike was only a matter of time. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. What began as a single, unseen strike from the depths of Earth's oceans quickly escalated into an unprecedented campaign of silent fury. Humanity, with its newfound sense of power and purpose, was no longer content to wait or beg for recognition. They had been forced into the shadows for far too long. Now they were making their presence felt in a way no one could have predicted. Swiftly, decisively, and with an intensity that made entire star systems tremble. The Federation, now fully aware of the humans' potential, scrambled to mount a defense, but they were woefully unprepared. The first wave of humanity's strikes had been subtle, designed to destabilize the Federation's infrastructure. Ships didn't explode in bright flashes of light. Planets didn't burn in instant, violent conflagrations. No. Humanity's weapon was something more insidious. An attack on the very foundation of the Federation's dominance, its technology. In the blink of an eye, the Prometheus engine had shown them just how easily human ingenuity could dismantle centuries of technological superiority. Earth's greatest weapon wasn't just the raw power it could unleash, it was the mind behind it. Humanity had done what no other species thought possible. They had learned to exploit the inherent flaws in the Federation's highly advanced systems. They had broken the invulnerability of the most sophisticated fleets with nothing more than their sheer determination and adaptability. And they were just getting started. In the days that followed, the Federation's strategic hub on the moon of Xylon 7 was the next target. The humans had perfected a form of subspace hacking, a technique so sophisticated that it turned the Federation's own weapons against them. Their long-range artillery batteries, once considered among the most advanced in the galaxy, were hijacked. As the Federation scrambled to secure the moon's outer defenses, human operatives, embedded deep within the network, took control of the weapon systems and turned them on the very facility that housed them. Explosions rang out across the station, but it wasn't the kind of destruction that left whole buildings in ruins. Instead, entire sectors of the station began to flicker, like dying stars. Gravity fields malfunctioned, twisting space within their walls. Power supplies short-circuited in erratic bursts. The most advanced shielding technology on the moon shattered in a matter of minutes, leaving the Federation scrambling for answers. From Earth's perspective, this was just the beginning. The humans knew that the Federation would not simply sit back and allow their reign of dominance to be questioned. So they struck quickly and decisively, targeting the Federation's vulnerable spots one after another. Communications were severed and critical supply lines were cut off. The galaxy-wide network that had once kept the Federation connected, like an intricate web of dominance, had begun to unravel. While the Federation's fleets searched helplessly for answers, humanity's true weapon was revealed: their relentless pursuit of knowledge. Unlike the races that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, humans didn't rely solely on brute force or ancient traditions. They didn't need vast fleets of ships or armies of warriors to make their mark. They relied on something far more dangerous: intelligence. And when the Federation finally figured out what had happened, it was too late. As the Federation scrambled to reassert control, they discovered something truly horrifying. Humanity had adapted. They had already begun constructing an enormous fleet, a fleet capable of reaching across the galaxy. But these weren't just ordinary ships. These ships were not designed with the slow-moving, predictable technologies that had defined galactic warfare for centuries. No, humanity had figured out how to create a new kind of ship, smaller, faster, and more unpredictable. The ships of the human fleet were powered by a blend of quantum and gravitational drives, designed to shift seamlessly between the physical and quantum realms, rendering them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. The first appearance of this fleet took the galaxy by complete surprise. Without warning, dozens of these human ships appeared in the skies of a peaceful Federation colony in the Andromeda sector. The colony, once a prosperous outpost of the Federation, had been untouched by the turmoil of war. Now, its peaceful skies were shattered by the hum of alien engines. The human ships did not fire immediately. They didn't need to. Instead, they simply hovered over the colony, casting long, looming shadows over the landscape below. A transmission came through, and it was the same message that had reverberated throughout the galaxy since the first strike. "We're done waiting." It was a message so simple, yet so powerful, that it shook the foundations of the Federation. The very thing that had once been the galaxy's greatest weapon, its fleet, was now a symbol of its weakness. The Federation's ships had never been designed to confront a threat like this. The advanced technology they so proudly wielded was no match for humanity's ingenuity. What came next was a swift and merciless series of tactical strikes, designed to cripple the Federation's infrastructure. Without their ability to coordinate, their fleets became sitting ducks, vulnerable to hit-and-run tactics that humanity perfected. Across the stars, the Federation's colonies and outposts began to fall. In the Xylan system, the once indomitable Federation stronghold, a beautiful planet of blue skies and towering cities, was now reduced to a barren wasteland, its power grid overloaded and its cities in ruins. Earth's fleet, smaller and faster than the massive Federation ships, launched surgical strikes that crippled Federation bases with precision. No battleships fired massive energy beams into the heart of cities. Instead, humanity's ships snuck in undetected, unleashing pinpoint strikes on critical infrastructure, then vanishing into the depths of space before anyone could even comprehend what had happened. Humanity's approach to war was unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. There were no honor codes, no written rules of engagement. The humans fought not just for survival, but for control. They didn't hesitate to use every advantage, every scrap of knowledge they had gathered. And it was clear to the Federation that this wasn't a conflict of just one species. Humanity was no longer alone. Their allies, once thought to be insignificant or non-existent, were now rising from the shadows, lending their support in ways the Federation had never expected. In the cold, vast void of space, alliances formed in secret, pacts of mutual survival and unspoken vengeance. There were whispers of former enemies coming together under the banner of humanity's revolution. Species that had once been suppressed by the Federation were now eager to lend their strength to the cause. The universe was changing, and the Federation had no idea how to stop it. They had underestimated humanity for too long, and now they were paying the price. As human ships continued their rapid expansion, the first taste of interstellar war was beginning to set in. The galaxy, once ruled by a handful of powerful empires, was about to be transformed. Humanity had thrown off its shackles and in doing so had brought the galaxy to its knees. There was no going back now. The war had begun. And no species would ever forget the moment when humanity finally lost its patience. The galaxy was in chaos. What had begun as a series of small targeted strikes had snowballed into a full-scale interstellar conflict. Once mighty empires now found themselves in retreat. Once unquestioned powers now scrambled for answers. The human uprising, fueled by a singular drive to prove that they would no longer be passive pawns in a universe dominated by alien forces, had taken the galaxy by storm. And no one was prepared for the consequences. The Federation, its leaders once proud and unchallenged, now faced the harsh truth. They had underestimated the very species they had watched with detached curiosity. Humanity was no longer a mere curiosity. They were a force of nature, and the universe would never be the same. In the heart of the Federation's most secure command center, an emergency summit was convened. The high-ranking officials of the Federation from every corner of the galaxy gathered in tense silence, aware that their once secure hold over the stars was slipping away with every passing hour. They had spent centuries expanding their reach, spreading their influence, and building a vast interstellar empire. But all of it was crumbling now. A single figure stood at the front of the room. Supreme Commander Elara Drax, one of the Federation's most decorated leaders, known for her ruthless efficiency and unshakable composure. Her once confident posture was now a reflection of the weight of a galaxy teetering on the brink of collapse. "The humans are a plague," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain composed. "We underestimated them. We assumed they were weak, primitive, and that they would never pose a threat. But now..." She paused, swallowing hard as the full weight of their situation hit her. "But now they've shown us what they are capable of. We've lost entire fleets, entire colonies. Their reach is spreading, and if we don't act now, the Federation will be no more." The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of Drax's words settling over them. There was no denying it. The Federation had lost the initiative. Every plan they had made to neutralize humanity had been turned against them. They had relied on their technology, on their control of the galaxy's resources, but humanity had found a way to outmaneuver them at every turn. The Federation had become a system built on old assumptions, and those assumptions had failed. But then a voice broke the silence, one not from the Federation but from an unexpected source. It came from the back of the room, from a representative of the Zel-Nor, an ancient species that had once been subjugated by the Federation. "Maybe it's not too late," the Zel-Nor ambassador, Zathros, spoke. "Maybe we can still stop them." Zathros's words were met with murmurs of confusion. How could anyone believe that after everything humanity had done? "Don't mistake me," Zathros continued. "The humans are unlike any species we've ever faced. But their aggression is not the end of the story. We have underestimated them, yes. But there's one thing they have that we don't: unity. If we can break that unity, if we can turn their newfound strength against itself..." A sharp hiss cut through the air as another voice, this one from a Federation leader, barked out in opposition. "You want us to appeal to their unity? You're suggesting we break their resolve by making deals with them? After everything they've done? This is no longer a diplomatic mission. This is war. And they've won." The room erupted into shouting and angry voices. Some still believed that humanity could be crushed, if only the Federation could strike hard enough. Others, like Drax, were no longer so sure. Humanity had proven their capacity for surprise, their capacity for change, and their ability to make things happen at a speed no one had expected. But amidst the noise, Drax's thoughts were elsewhere. She could hear the echoes of their earlier miscalculations, the fatal errors made in dismissing humanity as insignificant. And now the consequences were before her. The Federation, as it had existed for centuries, was coming to an end. The Federation's unity, which had once seemed unbreakable, was cracking. Trust was eroding. Alliances were splintering. The very fabric that held the galaxy's largest empire together was beginning to unravel, piece by piece. But it wasn't just humanity who was watching. Other species, long subjugated by the Federation's dominance, had begun to rise in rebellion, their suppressed anger coming to the surface. What had started as humanity's battle for survival had become a galvanizing force across the galaxy, awakening old enemies who now saw the Federation's weakness as an opportunity. It was at that moment, in the heart of the Federation's most secure command center, that the realization hit: the war had changed. It wasn't just about fighting for survival anymore. It was about the future of the galaxy itself. Humanity had shown everyone something that had never been seen before. They were capable of moving beyond their own limitations. They could evolve. And when a species like that learned to rise, it didn't just threaten the powers that stood above them, it threatened the very order of the universe. Elara Drax stood before the room, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes hard as she looked at the various representatives. Her voice, when it came, was laced with the weight of finality. "It's over," she said, her voice ringing with a chilling certainty. "The Federation can no longer exist as it once did. Humanity has already won. But the question remains, will the galaxy change with them? Or will it burn in the fires of their defiance? Outside the command center, in the cold expanse of space, humanity's ships continued their steady, relentless advance. The galaxy, once content in its long-standing peace, now found itself at the precipice of something new, something that could either bring about a new era of equality, or a new dark age of intergalactic war. No species would ever forget the moment when humanity finally lost its patience. And in the end, no one knew whether it would be the humans who would rise to rule the stars, or the stars themselves that would burn away under the weight of their fury.